We are out of the asylum again. Hi, regular viewers. Welcome to Articulated Collectables. And over here, we've got Ross. It's his brainchild. It's his inspiration.
Great having you guys. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, man.
Thanks for having us, man.
Hope you guys are enjoying the memories and
Yeah,
Nostalgia. It's
Definitely,
like
hey?
the freaking word for today.
So for those of you who haven't seen Ross's Articulated Collectables, he's on all the major social medias, yeah? You're on Insta, you're on Facebook, anywhere else?
And we'll put your stuff
OnlyFans? No.
up. Nice.
no.
So again, we'll put the links.
Just the main two, yeah.
Yeah, we'll put the links up and in comments so people give him a like, give him a follow. Come check out his... It's a very unique thing. You coined the term. It's how would you summarize it?
So it's a toy museum and an art gallery. And you've got to look
Passion
at
project.
you've got to look at the toys like an extension of an art gallery. So you look at them like pieces of art.
Nice.
Fair
It's
enough.
kind of how I've always seen them. And yeah, so it's one big giant art gallery, but it's cultural relics,
Yeah,
artifacts from the recent past, 80s and 90s.
definitely. And that's a wonderful walk down memory lane, I think. Eh?
I think the obvious question, man, is like, so what started all this? Like, I know that's a big question, but
Yeah, no, it's been like a 10-year journey. I started really focusing on nostalgia items in about 2015. I was buying toys that I had as a kid on eBay in 2011, but I really started looking basically for anything from the 80s and 90s. I've been chasing this nostalgia high. You get a real big high when you find something like that's 30 years old or 40 years old and it's
Yeah, I can
still in
attest.
still in good condition. Yeah, and
Definitely.
that obviously applies to comics as well. I was a comic collector when I was a kid. Loved comics. Always loved collecting things. And I started buying Dino Riders on eBay and Ninja Turtles and stuff from 1990 around there. And I was just going to leave it at that. And I was doing an art gallery at the time for pop art, contemporary or postmodern pop art.
Yeah.
Art that references street art, movies, gaming, comics, movies. And that did pretty well for a couple of years. But at the same time, I was buying stuff on eBay and thinking, well, let's combine the gallery with the toys. And I opened this up in 2019, just before the crash or whatever. And during lockdowns, it really became more about toys, and so the toys have really just taken over.
Yeah.
And there's a huge market now in South Africa just for nostalgia items.
Sure. Worldwide, actually, as well.
Yeah. It's just this longing for a simpler time, the 90s and the 80s, and I think it's also about people can bond over shared culture from that time.
Yeah.
And like things were just very well made and innocent. So the toys, I think for me, I saw the toys as sort of decor items for a man cave.
All right. Got you.
And so you have toys in conjunction with the art. And you sort of, if you have a little space in your house, I think every guy should have a man cave where they can just put a few collectibles. But
Sure.
yeah, I think people are looking at toys and pop culture items as traditional art. Not something you hang on the wall, but something you put on a shelf.
For sure. Yeah. And you know what? That goes all the way back to ancient civilizations, totems and various other symbols of gods that they might have worshipped or whatever the case is.
I have a lot of that around the museum as well. Tribal masks. Like these things, cultural sculpture.
Sure.
So you got to look at these things like cultural artifacts because it is a part of a Western culture.
100%, yeah.
And it's funny, I think people are looking more towards non-conventional things for cultural significance. And toys can be very meaningful for people.
For sure.
Not just the nostalgia, but like, it's something that people obviously have almost a spiritual connection to, especially if it was big in their childhood.
For sure.
And I think that's why the nostalgia market's going crazy at the moment.
I think you might be right. 100% people are searching for it.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I think also a big part of it, you touched on it, is that like, for me, I will rather go, in terms of comics now, I'm sure this relates to everything, but I'll go hunt down like an old read that maybe it's something I've heard someone like like, you know, Warren's like, dude, this is an amazing read. Like, you know, Animal Man, we were talking about it earlier. I still haven't read it, but I want to go hunt it down. I'll rather do that than a newer story, because I feel like there was so much more meaning and intention back then when they wrote it. Now it's just like, how can we puke out as much as we can and turn over sales?
Yeah.
Sure. No,
Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
I think what's happened with a lot of culture in general is it's homogenized. A lot of modern stuff just looks and feels the same, and you've really got to, if you want something special, you've got to look, you know, off the beaten path.
Yeah.
And whether that's independent or older back issues or, I think modern culture is kind of sterile in a way. It's corporatized, and like so, you know, Star Wars, like the mass adoption of Star Wars as a thing. A few years back kind of triggered me in a way. I just thought it was, same with comics. I think comics, when I was collecting comics, when I was in school, you know, Standard 4, comics weren't really a cool thing. And
no, there was definitely an underground.
It was counterculture.
Sure.
And it was subculture. It was like, you had to be a bit of a loser. I know it sounds crazy, but you were teased if you were
geek, loser, nerd, all of those labels were associated.
And like Star Wars, you were a bit of a nerd if you liked Star Wars back in the day, you know, before the prequels.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people don't know this about me, but like I really loved Episode 1.
Really?
Yeah.
All the damn trade union stuff as well.
Jar Jar. I loved that movie. I don't know. I was so hyped. I got on the hype train when, you know, when that music video came out.
Yeah.
Duel of the Fates.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. 100%.
And like that was my Star Wars thing. And I revisited the special edition, obviously, when I was, you know, before it became this huge thing. And and now it's I think people are told what to like. The mainstream.
Yeah, definitely.
Star Wars has become this sort of geek cred virtue signaling thing, or geek cred signaling with the mainstream. And a lot of this culture is very niche. Yeah. And if you're going to find something that's different and original that hasn't been sort of sold out to corporate America, you've got to look, you know, into other niche sort of things. Like, you know, and that's the same with comics. I'm sort of gravitating more towards independent and odd stuff like the Simpsons comics and Beavis and Butthead and Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah.
I think there's something pure about those. And obviously old superhero stuff or like secondary characters, and obviously some of the Vertigo stuff. But yeah, I kind of like you like something when it's special. It's like you have a band that you follow and you really like this band, and then they blow up and become global superstars, and you kind of think,
not the same anymore.
Yeah, it's not the band I fell in love with.
Yeah. And you know what, you both mentioned and you've used words that I think resonate not only with me, but I'm hoping our viewers, but things like when you find, the hunt, etc. And I think that's another part of us as collectors. There's something special about going on, when we were talking about it earlier, those you go to little markets, you find little secondhand stores, whatever, thrift shops, and you go in there and you go in with a little bit of hope and optimism. Most often you don't find anything, but every now and again when you come across a little gem, a perceived gem to you, something that's special to you, that like what you said, someone's told you about this story, this figure, whatever it is, you find that and it's at a very, like a bargain price.
Yeah.
That thing suddenly becomes this little totem for you. Bring it home, put it on a shelf, and it's like, that right there.
No, the hunt, so every collector understands this, whether you're collecting comics or toys or whatever.
Yeah.
For me, it's very much about where I find things, the memories that are attached to it. The hunt is like 90% of it. If you find something in a random place, I mean, it just creates this vivid memory in your memory bank. I had a guy come last year and he wanted to sell his Star Wars collection. He had a lot of Star Wars figures on card, and he'd been a Star Wars fan his whole life. They even played the Star Wars theme at his wedding.
Sure. Wow. Okay.
And
I might have known him. I probably met him in the community.
Yeah, guy's name's Clem, and he's based in Centurion. And he brought me around to do it. We did an evaluation on his collection, and I mean, he had a whole garage full of Star Wars stuff. And he wanted to sell the Star Wars collection so he could fix up a car. And I just thought, I was telling him like, no, please don't do this. Don't sell your collection. Because he would, when we were going through his collection, he would say where he was when he got this. And he said, I went on a trip to New York with my fiance at the time. And this was given to me by my brother. My brother got this for my birthday. And I said to him, like, there's a memory attached to each, the hunt of how you acquired these things.
Sure. And as you sell that, you're almost vanishing that memory. You're taking it out of your memory bank.
Some people say that's the sentimental value, but you're never going to get a monetary value back for those. And so he ended up keeping his collection after he came here.
Awesome.
Because he would have lost a hell of a lot of money selling a collection in bulk, to a flipper.
Of course.
And he converted his garage into basically a man cave setup. And I just said, I'm so glad you did that, because you would have regretted it. He's everyone knows him as this massive Star Wars geek, but like he was a Star Wars geek from when he was a kid, not one of the guys who comes in later in life.
Yeah.
Like he was, and he kept a lot of his toys from childhood. So these things were important to him.
That's amazing.
And for me as well, it's like the journey of finding this stuff is so much fun. It makes life it makes life very enjoyable when you've got like a couple of work things to do in an area and you can just say, oh, I know there's a couple of charity shops around there, I'll just do a little detour, you know. So I try hit like places, interesting shops or whatever if I'm doing errands. And the best feeling is when you rock up spontaneously, unplanned, and there's something sitting there on the shelf.
Yeah. No, dude, and it's actually inherent. I mean, we're talking about all the various psychology type people, the higher thinkers that we all follow on YouTube, etc. And all of them will agree, fundamentally, people need purpose. We need structure, we need purpose, we need routines, etc. But in that purpose is where the hunt comes from. It's, I work a 9 to 5, and this little side hobby, that hunt, that sense of accomplishment when I find the thing, gives me a sense of purpose. And it's something that most people would look at and go, I don't understand it, and I don't need them to understand. But for me, it contributes to my purpose in life, and every little thing that I find, every little gem, or even if it's just a thing on a list that I'm ticking off, it all contributes to that purpose, my reason for working and accumulating the money, etc.
I think that's what makes it so intertwined and complicated is all that, and then it's just, to you, it's art, because art is relative.
Correct.
So there's this, like you said, this beauty you can't explain, that it's like takes your breath away. It sounds cheesy, sorry, but like, so there's all that you just explained, and then there's just the whole, it's just art, Yeah. So it's like, I think it's like the merging of,
it's multi layers of appreciation. So once I've done the hunt, once I've got the thing, once I've displayed it, every time I come back, I can appreciate it from an artistic thing, looking at the sculpting, the whatever it is, looking at it from the nostalgia factor, the memories that I attribute to it. The side note of, me, and half of my collection is I've read a comic, I connected with the character in the comic, so therefore I want more comics of it and or figures, and I look at a figure on a shelf and it reminds me of that story, of that cartoon, of that. So the multi-dimensional, multifaceted types of things that come up on these things as well.
The perception has changed now. It's like consumer culture, comics maybe weren't classified as art, in the 60s and 70s in terms of high art. I'm talking about stuff that can be in a gallery.
Sure.
And I think what's happened with street art's come in.
Definitely, guys like Banksy and all of that stuff.
And they're just saying anything can be art, and anything done well can be art, high art.
For sure.
And so comics went into that, and where a lot of people are looking at it as high art, and it is. And I think that's happening with the toys in a way. People are looking at them as art, or even high art in some ways. Especially your urban vinyl is, that's art toys. They call them art toys.
Yeah.
But it's like this idea as well that we, back in the day, you would have had a still life or a landscape painting on your wall, and people would have thought art is painting or music or whatever. Art, people are appreciating things that weren't really classified as art, and they want to adorn their sort of houses and rooms with stuff, and that's what's been nice to see. Like this, there's less sort of stigma, and there's less hang-ups about stuff that you can really appreciate as art.
Definitely.
And that's the way culture is going. I mean, you've got to look at emerging cultural landscapes. So comics have been that for a few years.
Sure.
and you know, it's exploded out of that niche sort of subculture, and toys and nostalgia items are going to be that. You know, there's going to be something that's going to be highly collected and valued by people
For sure.
and as artwork. And so you've got to look at your consumer culture for that, because we don't have serious art like the Greeks did, or the Romans, or the Renaissance, but we have consumer culture and American culture, and it's a good one.
For sure.
It's good culture, and man, there's a lot of creativity that goes into anything, especially anything made in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. There's a lot of creativity behind, even cartoons.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it's a double-edged sword, because some of it is almost innocent creativity, but at the same time, most of it was around selling.
Yeah.
It was like, let's create this cartoon to sell the toys, or vice versa.
Well, it's capitalism fuels creativity.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys would not have gone to art school, but they end up working for a toy company, and they do a lot of creative, good work.
Yeah.
Like the toy industry in the 80s was deregulated by Reagan. You couldn't have cartoons to sell a product to kids on Saturday morning cartoons.
It had to come with a message and a wholesome thing,
and you couldn't overtly market toys to kids through cartoons. And that's
where the comic book industry came in, and they said, I can't do it here, but I can certainly talk about the comic book, and bang, you guys can sell it for me.
And like at the tail end of the 80s, they took off all that regulation.
Yeah.
Then you had toy companies making these amazing cartoons that were wholly new concepts. And so like even stuff that was puerile or juvenile in the 80s is actually really well done. And I think that's why people can appreciate He-Man and Thundercats and Bionic 6 and Dino Riders.
And the nice thing is it's the messages in them, especially those early ones, again, being forced to have some kind of a life lesson, something that a kid can go, friendship is important, honesty is important, kindness is important. Those universal things are still wholesome and hopefully valued today, which for me makes it more special. And in today's modern day cartoons and stuff, a lot of that is lacking. It's just not there.
It's all about irony and sort of clever humor. I don't know. Yeah, cartoons, even stuff from the 90s is so wholesome.
Yeah.
I get just, it's very comforting, like watching old Disney stuff. And the cartoons obviously were very influential on kids. I didn't realize, but like He-Man wasn't part of my generation. My older brother had He-Man, and I don't really remember the cartoon, but man, a lot of people grew up on those cartoons, and it sort of formed a bedrock of their personality for a lot of these guys.
No, definitely.
Subliminal messaging in cartoons actually got through. I think we're like 80s kids are a generation of warped kids, but like in a good way.
Yeah, I would second that.
Yeah.